Hello and welcome. In studio today is Hayk Hambartsum, who presented his film at the Golden Epcot Film Festival. And on your bio, Hayk, it mentioned something about a new wave of Armenian cinema. Let's talk about that before we talk about you and your film.
Okay, I mean, I feel like Armenia is really fertile ground for something new to be created, especially because in the region, in Turkey, in Iran, in Georgia, I feel like film has really reached the high plateau there, and it's now being represented all over the world, and people are recognizing Turkish cinema. Iranian cinema was really the first one to break through, and Armenia seems like there's been a few hiccups, but nothing serious has happened yet. And there's so many kids here who are excited about doing things, and there's so many stories. I mean, I feel like this place is a really interesting place to be in the world. And even in medieval times, where it used to function as like a middle place for East and West through the Silk Road, I mean, if we can reconnect to that and see how much potential there is here and how unique, even with what we have right now, how unique it is. There's so many films that could be made with the Armenian Hayatsk, with the viewpoint, that can be just something very new in cinema. So I hope, I mean, I don't know how much I participate in that. I do not live here, unfortunately, yet, but definitely it's just begging for something like that to happen, and I think it's just a matter of time before it does.
It's great insight, though. I mean, that you've noticed that it's ripe for something like that, a new movement that could start. You are participating in Golden Apricot this year with your film Medzarents. Let's talk about this film. What is it about? Medzarents, we know the name, but who was he?
Yeah, Misak Medzarents was a 20th century poet. Well, he was born in the 19th century. It's kind of a transition from 19th to 20th. He was born in Arevmetyan Hayastan in Western Armenia, and he did most of his work in Constantinople. He's known as one of our greatest poets, and he lived quite a tragic life. He died when he was 22 from tuberculosis, but he was really very precocious. It's kind of like a Mozart or Arthur Rimbaud. He produced just 2 books of poetry, but they're just amazing, amazing poems, extremely unique. And also, what's interesting about him is he's not so much there isn't so much a nationalistic tendency in his writing. Let's say that some of our Soviet Armenian writers would have and talk about, let's say, the lost motherland or any of these things, but it's purely nature and much more ephemeral things and eternal things, and not maybe so specifically, let's say, accenting the Armenian aspect of things, which also, you know, was kind of, me being in LA, it was easier to access for me as a person.
So you took the idea of Medzarents and you have a narrative story. What is the story about?
The story is based around the character named Vahag, and he's a diasporan Armenian. He lives in LA. He is a struggling actor in Hollywood. And there are many of those. And I had friends, and so it was something that I had firsthand knowledge of. And he has a Korean girlfriend, and they live together, and she's also a struggling actress. So they're both just actors in Hollywood trying to make it, kind of. And he gets offered to play the role of Misak Medzarents in a play. And because he's Armenian, but he's not that in touch with his roots, with his past, with the language, he's a little hesitant. But the more he gets into the role, the more his Armenianness starts to awaken in him, so to speak. And then naturally, kind of because of that, issues start arising between him and his girlfriend. And then there's another Armenian girl who's the costume designer, and she comes into the picture. So these are definitely playing in the film as topics and issues, as well as being a diasporan. Because as a diasporan, the more you become aware that you're Armenian, the more you also become aware that you're American, let's say, or not Armenian. There's this strange kind of split in you, and the more you confront it, the more obvious it becomes, this dichotomy.
Well, I want to ask you about how the character, how much he finds out about Medzarents and Medzarents' philosophy, but first we want to take a look at the trailer. So here's Hayk's trailer from Medzarents.
Suddenly I got mad at you and asked you angrily if you believed in the power of prayer.
I am going to be the lead in a play.
What?
그대로 세상 빠르게 경기 스매트럼 라사드. 아우터린 지아말. 좀 기대해서 interested. Anasına kanalar. Torik tider. Rahatiyunan anasına kan.
What was his name again?
That's Hayk Hambartsum's film Medzarents that just recently played at the Golden Apricot Film Festival. Your lead character when he's studying for the role of Medzarents, how much of the poet's philosophy or outlook in life does he consume?
Well, so one of the first poems that he comes across as he's getting ready for his role is called the Modern Man's Lord's Prayer. It's one of the last poems Medzarents wrote towards the end of his life. Didn't even get published. And this poem has a line that repeats over and over and over. It's Turin ziter urachutun ananznakan, which in English roughly translates to "Give me, Lord, that selfless happiness" or selfless joy. At first he reads it and he continues reading other poems, but this idea stays in him. And the reason you know that is because later on, very kind of unexpectedly, he brings up this idea of selflessness. He asks this costume designer in the film, the Armenian girl, what does selflessness mean? He's confused, he doesn't understand. And also I think when you're an actor, especially in Hollywood, you're constantly being confronted with your own ego, constantly being confronted with yourself, so to speak. Maybe ego and self are a little different, but anyway, you're constantly confronted by yourself. And so this line has like a profound effect on him, and later on it gets brought up too, and ideally the film tries to show that he reaches a kind of selflessness at the end of the film. That's the goal, at least. I don't know how much.
Transformation. What interested you, or how did you find an interest in Medzarents?
It's actually very similar to the story. I also, when I discovered him, I came across this line, and the line started repeating in me. And initially there was no plan to make a film, but when the line started repeating in me, I realized it was important, and then I started reading a little about him. And then the other thing that was important technically was he looked, there's a few pictures of him, one of the most famous ones. He looks a lot like a good friend of mine who's a very good actor who plays him. His name is Yerevan-born. And Rafi and I had wanted to work together. We had done something in the theater, but we had never worked in film, and we wanted to, and it was just a matter of the right thing to do. And he looked so much like Rafi, and then I was like, oh, this is perfect. And then the film started coming together in my head. So it was the line, and then the fact that I had someone who looked like Medzarents. Because if I didn't have someone who looked like him, it would have, for me, it would have kind of not worked out well.
It's also interesting that someone in the diaspora would be looking at our classic poets in this day and age, 21st century. So it's hopeful that there's interest in our past. Tell us biographically, you were born in
I was born in Yerevan, yeah, in Armenia. I moved when I was 8 years old. Now I'm 29, so I've lived the majority of my life in LA. Around 2008, I started coming back here frequently to work on a feature-length script. And then when I realized that wasn't going to materialize as a film, I came back to make a shorter film in Goris, Mirhav, which is also based on a Armenian writer's story, Axel Bakun's.
And what is that summary? The pheasant.
Pheasant, yeah. Pheasant in English, Mirhav in Armenian. It's basically about an old man who he makes wine and presses grapes, and he's constantly remembering the love of his life, kind of, when he was younger and how he could never be with her. But but he keeps remembering this one specific memory that I guess you can say haunts him, but also he just, maybe both haunts him, but he also remembers it fondly. It's a weird ambiguity.
So now you've got another Armenian-themed project that you're working on. Tell us about your French project.
Well, it's not so much a French project. I hope in France, there is a project in France, but that's kind of something different. Maybe let me tell you that when I came here in June, I went to Artsakh. I went to Karvajar. Karvajar is one of the liberated territories in Karabakh. And I went to make a quasi-documentary, quasi-fictional film kind of. So that was very interesting. I hope to edit it over the fall and have that ready. But when I was saying I came in 2008 to work on the feature, I worked on the script and I have the script, and now that I hope will be my first feature film. So I'm working on the script now to make it better and slowly start trying to find financing, maybe in France, maybe in the States, but the film is based completely in Armenia and it's in Armenian, but hopefully not just for Armenians, but for everyone.
Okay, we look forward to seeing that film up in the next Golden Apricot, hopefully. Hayk Hambartsum, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
All right, and we'll see you next time on CivilNet.